If there's anything we've learned from this new Netflix animated movie, it's that you should be very careful who you give both a driver's license and a job to transport decorative goods.
Fake unicorn.
Thankfully here it worked out pretty well. This is Thelma the unicorn character's good to evil. And we'll start as we normally do with the characters whose sparkle stands out the most. These characters are the good. And the top spot was a bit of a tough choice, but we decided to give our gold medal of good to Susie. This adorable wheelchair-bound kid is technically the first to discover Thelma's newfound accidental unicorn getup, and is the first of many adoring fans. And she also turns out to be her most loyal fan. She's there from the beginning and still willing to give her a shot after it's revealed that she's just a regular pony. There's not a lot to say about her, she's just a sweet kid who likes unicorns, and we hope that magic inspires her for years to come. Honorable mentions to the other fans too, including that one goth kid who looks like Gaz from Invader Zim. The silver medal of good has to go to Thelma's ride or die best friend, Otis. Otis is basically the ideal best friend. He's loyal, caring, and genuinely understanding.
I'm happy playing music anywhere, as long as it's with you.
At the same time though, he's not just a yes man. While he never backs away from supporting Thelma and her dreams, he also encourages her to be herself instead of living a lie.
But don't you want to wash the paint off first?
Above all else, Otis is a friend through and through. When Rusty Bucket's audition goes poorly, he shows up at the same diner that she's drowning her sorrows in to try and cheer her up over a game of Dungeons and Wagons. Even when he doesn't feel as certain as she does about their endeavors, he's still always there to support and help her however he can. And when he goes missing, he's one of the first and most dedicated people to search for her. His devotion to his friends knows no bounds. And I will say it's nice that this movie doesn't force that beautiful friendship to turn into a romance. The bronze medal of good goes to the legendary music producer Peggy Purvis. Despite having retired for a while after going blind, Peggy sensed potential in Thelma and her band, and decided to become their manager. Unlike a lot of managers in fiction, it's always clear that Peggy has her clients' best interests at heart.
Someday the Rusty Buckets picture gonna be up there too.
She has her own reservations about trusting Vic Diamond to let her open for Nicky Narwhal, but she ultimately lets them go for it, and while this did turn out to be a mistake, it definitely wasn't an intentional one. As a matter of fact, Peggy remains loyal to Thelma long after she's bailed on her as a manager, going as far as telling her that she always knew she wasn't a real unicorn, but she knew she'd come around and be true to herself anyway. If that weren't enough, even being blind won't stop Peggy from defending her clients from rogue security guards and the like. And on top of all that, she's married to this guy who looks like Wild West from Family Guy. It's not a good or a bad thing morally speaking, but it's kinda cool. But let's finally talk about the star of the show herself, Thelma the Unicorn. Thrust into stardom with paint, glitter, and the love of a little girl in a wheelchair, Thelma takes the opportunity to become famous while she's got it, which unfortunately means lying to herself and the people around her for a pretty lengthy time. Thelma has a serious case of tunnel vision throughout most of the movie, while Otis and Reggie are content to be wherever they go, as long as they're together. Thelma longs for more. In itself, that's not a bad thing, but she's regrettably willing to falsify a persona to get famous, thinking that it's the only way she'll ever get a chance to show the world her music. Ultimately, she ends up regretting this decision due to missing her old friends. It's at worst when she has to go into hiding when Megan threatens to expose her secret to the world. But thankfully, she comes around and decides to show the world who she really is.
I'd like to share a song with you. Alright, guys. Let's do this.
We have to give Thelma some extra good points here because on top of showing her clear discomfort with lying throughout the film, she never resorts to mistreating her friends. Usually in these sort of rise and fall stories, the main character becomes a jerk at some point, but not so with Thelma. She just ran low on time for her friends and starts to regret her facade as a result. But for all she overcame though, we'll say that she's more than earned her share of fans. And really, lies aside, she did a really good job singing. Nearing the end of Thelma's core friend group, we have her other BFF, Reggie. Admittedly, Reggie's not the brightest bulb in the socket. He's a great drummer, a not so great driver, and a guy who's overall content to just chill with the people around him. While he's not as emotionally open as Otis though, he's still a nice guy who cares about his friends. And let the record show that he was just as determined as Otis to look for Thelma when she went missing after all. That said, like we implied earlier, he can be a bit reckless. We're also pretty sure we saw him kill at least 2 security guards by accident, and didn't seem too worried about it. I guess you could call it self-defense, but they were technically trespassing. So if talking animals go to court in this universe, he might want to lawyer up pretty quick. From a friend to a fan and possible relative. Next, we have a brief mention of Thelma's almost legally adopted son. Yeah, we really did try to find this guy's name, but no dice. It's not important though. All you need to know is that he really wants to get Thelma's autograph so he can legally be considered her son. I mean, it's definitely weird, and definitely worthy of the Darwin Center Medal, but weirdness aside, he seems like an okay guy.
Mommy, is this donkey bothering you?
He even acts as a sort of makeshift bodyguard for Thelma at some points, and like little Susie, remains loyal to her after the big identity reveal. And driving right to the end of the good category, we have the trucker, aka the reason the whole plot of the movie came into being. We weren't really expecting this guy to come back after the first act, where his reckless driving resulted in pink paint and glitter being spilt on Thelma, thus giving her the new persona we all know and love. We were gonna put him in the gray area because despite his lack of malice, this guy has all the driving smarts of a drunk SpongeBob. But what he lacks in road safety skills, he more than makes up for in compassion and wisdom. He's more than happy to give Thelma a ride, not knowing who she is, and offers her some unintentional inspiration to be herself, rather than hiding who she is for the sake of others.
You know, being on the road makes you want to ponder, and I ponder a lot.
It's this mutual encouragement that gives him the strength to tell his wife that he's a world-famous champion of the underground clogging circuit, which I guess is a thing. And in any case, he's a nice guy who's more than happy to be a friend to anyone who needs one. He just really needs to go back to driver's ed. But now it's time for a brief intermission. Celebrity status is a strange thing. You might even call it a huge gray area. And we're kicking ours off with another star, Danny Stallion. His first impression, being famous for cud-chewing videos, made us expect him to hold the Darwin Center Medal. But then he dropped the bombshell that he's only doing the whole fame thing to pay for medical school, so he can become a brain surgeon.
Gotta pay for med school somehow, right?
He's still lying about his identity, sure, but he's trying to put some good out in the world. Next up are Nikki's reliable background dancers, the Pool Boys. These guys are pretty much always dancing anytime they're on screen, whether they're supposed to be working, they are working, or they're performing. You can bet they're busting moves wherever there are moves to be busted. And they're only in the gray area because they don't seem to have any issue working for Vic, who's a pretty sleazy guy. Next, we go back to the earlier parts of the film to talk about the judges. You could honestly argue these guys are the ones who kickstarted Thelma's identity crisis by telling her point blank that she'd never perform at Sparklepalooza because she didn't have the right look.
We just want people with a certain look.
Now, that is ridiculously mean, especially considering that they didn't even let her start to perform. But as judges for a big event like Sparklepalooza, they're just doing their jobs by telling people who can and can't move forward. When Thelma gives her big speech later on, they do actually look remorseful for what they said, so here's hoping they've learned their lesson. And rounding out the gray area is Zirconia. She's the leader of a group of horses who rival Thelma back on the farm, and as the typical mean girl character, she's incredibly dismissive of Thelma for even considering trying out for Sparklepalooza.
Ain't nobody on Earth want to hear music from a plain old farm pony.
There isn't much to say since she really just shows up at the beginning and end of the movie, but in the end, she does actually come around as a fan of Thelma's, now that she's popular. Look, people change, I'm not saying she hasn't, but 90% of what we saw of her was mean, so you'll have to understand our doubts that this change of heart was fully sincere. Still, we are happy you got over your pink eye at least. With the gray area wrapped up, it's finally time to look at the sleazier side of Hollywood. These are the bad and the evil. And the bronze medal of evil has to go to Nikki Narwhal. The moment Thelma started getting popular, Nikki went ballistic, even going as far as to attack her during her performance.
Get off my stage!
Which got her understandably canceled for a while. For this reason, we have to give her the Envy Center Medal. Nikki is no saint, but it's worth noting that she isn't a flat-out supervillain. When discussing her plans to take Thelma down, she's shocked when Megan proposes murder as a solution, instead opting for Megan to go digging up dirt on her that they can use to turn public opinion around. Granted, not a murderer is a pretty low bar to reach, but she does reach it. She's definitely a corrupt person, but she isn't beyond saving. Even she's moved to tears by Thelma's speech at the end, and it's revealed that she's not a narwhal after all. So maybe the world will be seeing a more sincere, compassionate Nikki Narwhal in the future. Or, Nikki Whale. You know what, maybe just keep the name. Taking the silver medal of evil is Nikki's favorite little assistant, Megan. Yeah, we already mentioned that Megan was fully willing to kill Thelma if it came down to it, and almost seemed disappointed that wasn't the plan Nikki was thinking of.
Are we talking about murder here?
So she definitely gets the Wrath Sinner medal. Megan simply takes way too much pleasure in making others suffer to not take that home. She blackmails Thelma into disappearing from the public eye with the threat of releasing a video exposing her true identity to the world. While she is willing to compromise and let her leave quietly instead of posting it right away, that's not exactly something that makes up for her psychotic behavior. Let's not forget that she paid 6 people a total of $20, yes, split between them, to do her dirty work for her. Being a psychotic manager willing to tase animals to death is one thing, but underpaying workers, actually no, both of those things are really bad. Her only real saving grace is that she does genuinely seem to care for Nikki, and hopefully, that potential redemption arc she's set up for might just rub off on her. But the gold medal of evil was never much of a question. When it comes down to it, Vic Diamond is no doubt the most malicious character, and Fanboy from Fanboy and Chum Chum really let himself go. Jokes aside, this dude is a menace. He has no loyalty to his clients, from abandoning Nikki right before a big performance just because Thelma was becoming famous, to abandoning Thelma while she'd gone and disappeared, and going back to Nikki of all things. We have to give him the Pride Sinner medal and the Greed Sinner medal. Seriously, how many perfumes and cereals do you need? Vic will do anything to get fame and fortune, even right down to completely changing his identity and forcing others to do the same.
The most important thing in the music biz is how you look.
We do feel for his tragic past, which more than anything was basically just him being ignored by the popular kids at school. So his relatively normal past then. It'd be one thing if he'd just gained more confidence in himself, but this guy took it one step further by using his role as a talent manager to build up his bank account and reputation. And if that still doesn't convince you, this guy fired a legit rocket launcher at Peggy in the gang's car just to isolate Thelma, tricking her into thinking they'd abandoned her. I'm still not even sure what he stood to gain from that. He just had no problem nearly killing 4 people, even if he had a turnaround like the other 2 antagonists by the end of the movie. A deed like that is a surefire way to stay at the top of the podium of evil. Psychological manipulation, animal cruelty, attempted murder, and wearing fake teeth that actively make him look worse. Talk about evil incarnate.